We're looking at chapter 4 of our text, perception and how we perceive others. We already have looked at the perception process. Now we look at influences on perception. A variety of factors influence how we select, organize, interpret, and negotiate information about others. The first factor is access to information. We can only make sense of what we know, and none of us knows everything, even about the closest people around us. So the information that you have about me is partial. When new information becomes available, your perception of me might change, either for the better or for the worse. We gain more information about another person when we see them in a different role, in a different situation, in a different context. And it might be that you might get some information about me from social media, and certainly that can provide a new way of interpreting me, and it'll affect your perception of who I am. So access to information is the first one. The second one is physiological influences. And so our different perspectives come from the way we view the world in terms of our senses. Each of us tastes and sees and hears and touches and smells in a way that's different. We're not exactly the same in the use of our senses. So some people are more sensitive to sound. Some people are more sensitive to heat and cold. We experience the world differently depending on our age. And we experience the world differently throughout our lifetime. Consider, for example, how you looked at your parents when you were 4 or 5 years old versus you were 13 or versus when you were 25. Or how you view the world at those different times. With age comes a certain amount of maturity, and you perceive the world in a different way. Health and fatigue. Health can have a strong impact on how you perceive and relate to others. So if you're not feeling well, you probably don't process as well, and you don't interact with others as well. Fatigue also affects relationship. People who are sleep deprived, for example, perceive time intervals as longer than they really are. Biological cycles is another factor. Each of us has a daily cycle in which all sorts of changes constantly occur. And so are we a morning person? Are we a night person? Hunger, certainly being hungry, affects how we interact with others, and you've probably experienced that. Neurobehavioral challenges. People with bipolar disorder experience significant mood swings in which their perception of events, friends, family members, and even attempts at social support will shift dramatically. Psychological influences include mood. Your emotional state strongly influences how you view people and events around you, and therefore also how you communicate. So are you in a happy mood? Are you in an anxious mood? Are you in a critical mood? And certainly that will affect your interaction with others. Self-concept, the way we think and feel about ourselves, certainly strongly influences how we interpret another person's behavior. Social influences. Social scientists have developed a standpoint theory to describe how a person's position in society shapes his or her view of society in general and of specific individuals. So the perspective of somebody who's privileged, who's well socioeconomically, versus somebody who is socioeconomically poor or disadvantaged, and of course they see the world very differently. Sex and gender roles. Sex, again, remember, refers to your biological characteristics. So your biological characteristics, whereas gender refers to social and psychological dimensions of masculine and feminine behavior. A person with relatively equal masculine and feminine characteristics is referred to as androgynous. Men and women perceive the world differently. Women are better than men at reading emotion in facial expressions, and women are generally more perceptive about interpreting others' nonverbal cues. And then sex roles. Sex role stereotypes, forgive me, can influence perception. So what society scripts you to be, what society says male should be like, and what female should be like. And some people buy into those stereotypes. And so when they see somebody who doesn't act according to that stereotype, they tend to perceive them in a negative fashion. Occupational roles, the kind of work we do also governs our view of the world. So when I'm interacting with someone, I tend to focus a lot on the way they communicate, both verbally and non-verbally. Relational roles. Relational roles affect not only who you are in terms of defining you, but they also affect your perception. Look at the role of a parent, for example, the role of a son, the role of a daughter, and certainly those affect your perceptions. And then cultural influences. Culture influences selection, organization, interpretation, and negotiation, and it exerts a powerful influence in the way we view others' communication. So even beliefs about the value of talk. Western culture tends to view talk as desirable for social purposes as well as to perform tasks. Silence has a negative value in these cultures. So it's likely to be interpreted that somebody who is silent, lacks interest, is unwilling to communicate, is anxious, is hostile, is shy, or maybe it's a sign of interpersonal incompatibility. On the other hand, Asian cultures tend to view talk quite differently. Here, silence is valued, and so a talkative person is often considered a show-off or a fake. So when people from different cultural backgrounds interact, their perception about each other from their own cultural perspective might result in disapproval and mistrust. Only when they realize that there are some cultural differences and cultural factors at play can they adapt or at least maybe understand or even respect the differences that do occur in behavior. People who are raised in individualist cultures who value independence are often not adept or less adept at perspective taking than from those collectivistic cultures which value interdependence. So culture does shape the way we perceive, understand, and even empathize with others. The next segment will deal with common tendencies in perception.